Welcome to our first panel. It's entitled The Purpose of Asset Managers in Driving Sustainability, where we have partnered with Argudan Governance Academy, an opinion leader promoting good governance both locally and internationally. Our team of speakers have been working together on publishing a series of articles and research on sustainability and global exchanges, and we have been heavily supporting this initiative as TÜYİD by publishing it in our bulletins every month. Welcome everyone, it's great to be all here. Thank you for supporting us today. I would like to start with a brief introductory round, please. So, Dr. Argudan, can you please take off? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be on this platform, and especially talking about sustainability, which is very dear to my heart. I'm the chairman of Arge Consulting, a leading Turkish management consulting firm, and also the founder of Argudan Governance Academy Foundation, where we do research and education for good governance in all aspects of life, including corporations, NGOs, and public sector. So in a nutshell, that's who I am. And let me leave the floor to other colleagues to introduce themselves.
Paul, can we continue with you, please?
Sure, thank you, Asli. Hello there, and just to echo what Dr. Argudan said, thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. Actually, it's always a great pleasure to speak to the Turkish Investor Relations Society. It's wonderful to be here, again, echoing Dr. Argudan, to talk about sustainability. I'm the ex-CEO and president of CFA Institute. I retired from that position at the end of last year. And I hope during my 5-year tenure at the helm of the CFA, I pushed forward many of the sustainability themes that we're going to talk about during this conference, across a wide map of things, not just environmental, but gender, ethics, all sorts of different paradigms. And I hope I'm continuing that work, not just working hand in glove with Dr. Argudan and my other colleagues on a series of articles, but also helping advise one or two ESG businesses as well, in addition to having a number of other non-exec type roles.
Thank you, Paul. Anand, let's continue with you, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I'd like to thank the Turkish IR Society for organizing this wonderful forum and presenting us with an opportunity to interact with all of you. My name is Anand Ramachandran. I'm a professional investor, a fund manager, and over the last 25 years of my career, I have invested across many markets globally. Currently, I'm based in Singapore, moved here after having worked in London, gained enough extensive experience investing across emerging markets. One of my belief systems is that investing is not just about counting dollars and cents and making money, but also about getting ahead of the narrative, looking into the future trends, and making a difference. And in that, asset managers are uniquely positioned. Not only are we constantly measured, our actions tend to have a significant indirect impact on society at large. And that is something which can be a force for change if handled properly. I'm happy to be here today and share my insights along with my colleagues and perspectives, and hope you find some of it useful. Thank you once again for inviting me.
Thank you. Our pleasure to have you too. And Kubra?
Same here. Thank you so much, Aslı, for organizing this event. Thank you to Turkish IR Society for making this happen and inviting us. So my name is Kubra Koldemir, and I work for Argudan Governance Academy, and I'm sustainability researcher there. In the past, I used to be located in New York, and I used to be in finance and investments. I used to work first for a long-only fund, and then I worked for a hedge fund. But currently at Argudan Academy, we are based in Istanbul, and I'm involved in various projects, including this writing initiative that Aslı you have just mentioned. I'm one of the co-authors there. I also coordinate sometimes between co-authors as well as our stakeholders, such as global exchanges, who are also contributing to the articles. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here right now.
The pleasure is all ours. Thank you. So let's start with the questions now. Transformative business leader Paul Pullman defines sustainability as putting the interest of your children and their children ahead of your own personal greed. Dr. Arguden, let's start with you, please. How do you define sustainability? Why is it important? And why should companies stop treating it like a box-ticking exercise and start embracing it fully at the corporate level?
Thank you, Aslanım. I think we can approach definition of sustainability from many different perspectives, but let me start from a perspective that touches a lot of people, which is perhaps religion. I think sustainability is about protecting the humanity from the human being's excesses. And I think this common understanding is the basic understanding of all the religions. And let's look at what the religions are trying to do for people. One of the things for the religions is that, and I think it was put very well by a 13th century philosopher, Yunus Emre, who said, regard the other as you regard yourself. That's the meaning of 4 holy books, if there is any. And for those who are Christians and so forth, I think the saying that thou shalt love your neighbor as thyself is a very similar golden rule of almost all the religions. And let's look at what these religions are trying to do. One of them is social justice and helping the needy. I think this is the basic tenet of all religions. Another issue about the religions is that religions try to make people think longer than their lives, whether through, it depends on everybody's belief, but for example, in Hinduism, it might be reincarnation. In other religions, it might be the hell, heaven concepts, but all of them are trying to make people think beyond their lives, okay? And also, making sure that you protect the assets that are entrusted upon you, whether it is the lives of other people around you or the other species, the nature and so forth, is part of all the religions, including shamanism and so forth. So sustainability, in a nutshell, is protecting the humanity and livelihood of the planet that we live in from the excesses of the human beings who tend to have a nature to focus on the short term. So that's basically from this perspective. We can talk about it from the economics perspective. Mm-hmm. And people establish institutions for 2 basic reasons. One of them is utilization of better utilization of resources. The other is better management of risks, regardless of the institution type, whether it's the family, tribe, nation, company. I think these are the basic reasons. Okay, and when we try to do this, obviously, we need to consider the externalities as well from the economic perspective. Mm-hmm. Positive externalities as well as negative externalities. Unfortunately, externalities do not show up on our balance sheets or income statements. Sure. However, avoiding them and not measuring and managing them actually come back to haunt you as risks from different perspective, and is a impediment to sustainable value creation. Mm-hmm. So companies' approach to sustainability has started from corporate social responsibility understanding, which is a nice thing to do. So we are doing our business on one side, and let's do some nice things on the other side, not necessarily tied together. But people and leaders who have understood and paid attention to this soon realized that actually paying attention to sustainability matters is a great risk management tool as well. Remember, risk management was one of the top reasons why we are establishing institutions like firms. So if you don't manage those, it comes back to haunt you. And many of the regulations and so forth come to us after major disasters and so forth. Once we have the risk, we try to regulate it. But first, we need to have an understanding. Okay? And others, very few leaders at this time, including Paul Polman, who is one of our advisory board members in the academy as well, we are proud to have realized that actually focusing on sustainability issues as a business issue is a value creation opportunity. Because how do you create value? By solving problems. If the survivability of the human species is a problem, and perhaps one of the top problems in the world, providing solutions to this is a great value creation opportunity. And I think Paul has demonstrated how this can be done in a major organization like Unilever. For example, rather than just focusing on how much water Unilever plants can save, Unilever into all the supply chain to look at, for example, how can our design of our products and how can our products minimize water utilization throughout the value chain, including our customers. This is a huge value creation opportunity. I think what we need to understand in the sustainability matter is that it is not an adjunct to our business. It's an integral part of our business, and we have to manage it as integral part of our business. I think many of the corporations are not there yet. They are starting to find linkages. We'll get to this, I think, in the second part. But those who have this integrated understanding and manage their organizations according to this issue and incorporating sustainability, all the externalities along with their business, are going to create value in a sustainable fashion for a longer period and will have much better innovation capability by looking at the problem from a much higher level. Thank you.
Thank you. The Davos Manifesto of this year is entitled The Universal Purpose of a Company in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and it gives a detailed definition of purpose. As stakeholder capitalism starts transforming the world, are we indeed moving away from shareholder primacy? Paul, why might purpose play an important role in driving change towards sustainable business? Can we get your views?
Thank you, Asli. I mean, it's a great question, and in many ways, it's the most exciting conversation I think that's happening in the business world today. What are we all doing? What's the point of all of this activity that we do? And I think there's another sort of dimension to that, particularly if you're a financial services type. I think most people out there, if I can use the phrase, most people on the street find it very hard to understand the value that all of us in the financial services industry add to society in general. And so finding purpose, expressing purpose, I think has never had so much of an important impact as it does today. I wanted to start with just sort of trying to define a little bit, as Dr. Ergedan has so eloquently done, define sustainability. I think defining purpose needs to be done a little bit because, we're very familiar with the corporate world having mission statements and having vision statements. And I'm sure all of your colleagues in IR are groaning at the prospect of having yet a third statement now, which is a purpose statement.
Exactly.
And yet one more thing to define, yet one more thing to maintain and communicate. And why should you? And I think it's important just to think about what a purpose statement for a company is trying to do. It's really trying to say, why does a company exist and for whom? And if you think about mission and vision, they're much more about the how and the what, and not so much the why and the for whom. And I think that's the thing about purpose, is it's trying to sit above mission and vision and try and put that within a much broader context than just the nuts and bolts of running the company. And I think to go back to your question, I think why is it important? Well, I think they're two broadly main reasons for that. The first is regulatory pressure, frankly. I mean, the crises of 2008 and the one that we're currently living through in the pandemic, as Dr. Ergudan said, are really forcing governments to think very carefully about how their economies work and who they benefit, and whether those the rewards of corporate activity are spread fairly throughout the communities. And I think that's really important. And it's becoming really conventional to recognize that all companies carry a social license that can be withdrawn from them. And if you think about that in a very basic sense, wherever you are in the world, when you want to form a company, you have to go along to your equivalent of Companies House, and you have to register that company. Then you have to fill out a form, and you have to say what's the company going to do, and you have to have articles of memorandum of association, etc., etc. And that's a license to operate. May not be a license in the sense that we all think about it with securities commissions and things like that, but it is actually society licensing the corporation to do business. And more society is realizing that there's a point behind granting that license, and that is that you want to make sure that those companies that you have licensed are actually contributing to society in a way that society values and wants. And so I think that's really important message to get over. Now, I know John Authors, who spoke to us earlier, talked about the much maligned Milton Friedman and his support of shareholder capitalism. And I think, I think that is breaking down hard form Friedman type of thinking, although I think actually everybody says that if you go on and you actually complete reading that essay, you'll see that Friedman does acknowledge that there are many, many occasions when having a broader set of purposes will actually lead to better corporate performance. And I think that's really what we're trying to say. A healthy company really needs to balance the interests of all of its stakeholders, whether those are shareholders, staff, suppliers, regulators, and the communities that host them, frankly, if it's to maximize its long-term value. And that's tremendously difficult. And we tried to speak about this in the last article that we wrote on this subject, that it's hard to value sustainability and purpose in a company because it's intangible. You only really get benefit from it when disaster strikes. And hopefully disaster never strikes. If you think about it, it's like, the value of having purpose and sustainability crystallizes in moments of intense stress, whether that's with, say, stranded assets, whether that's climate change, whether that's misaligning your supply chain so that you have poor human resource activity going along with it. Those things are intangible benefits of having purpose and hanging purpose around sustainability that only really can be truly valued in a crisis. It's like insurance. You don't think about it until you need it, basically. So I think it's very hard for companies to value sustainability, to think about purpose in that sense, and for shareholders to truly sort of value it within a company balance sheet. The second reason why I think it's important is really social pressure. Companies more and more have to meet the expectations of society and of their staff and of their customers. And the way that you express purpose, the way that you express your values and beliefs system comes back again to Dr. Argudan's very pertinent comments on religion. Your values and beliefs inform your sense of purpose, and you need to have those as a company. And if you haven't worked through them as a board with your CEO, you will find that at some point you will trip up over their lack. And I'll give you two examples of that. One very personal to me as the ex-CEO of the CFA Institute. In 2018, our head office was in a small town city, I should say, in the United States, in Virginia, called Charlottesville. And for those of you who have good memories, in 2008, we had a Ku Klux Klan rally in Charlottesville. and a young lady was actually killed during that rally, and my staff were severely upset by that. If we hadn't, as an institute, previously worked out our purpose and our values and beliefs, like President Trump, it would have taken me 48 hours to respond to that crisis. And remember how much excoriation President Trump got for that delay. Because as a modern CEO, you are dragged into these social questions and you need to respond on point within 12 hours, absolutely maximum. And I was able to do that because we'd already thought through our positions on what's fashionably called Black Lives Matter and things of that nature. We'd already thought through those things. So I had responses all ready to go and was able to equip myself, I think, reasonably well during that process. The second example I'd give is COVID-19. And I was reading today about the chief executive of British Airways who's just been fired. I don't know if you've seen that, but one of the reasons he was fired was because his response to COVID-19 was considered to be a little bit deaf. That he talked about laying off staff and then rehiring them at lower rates, basically. And that betrayed, frankly, poor purpose and poor values and beliefs, and for which he paid for with his job. And I think that's really the purpose of this conversation, is if a company doesn't have those things worked out, it can't respond to crisis management properly in the modern world. The final point that you asked in your question is are we moving away from shareholder primacy? And I know Anand will pick that up. He's at the cutting edge of investment management, and yes, I think we are moving away from shareholder primacy, but only very slowly. To be honest, it's not really changing very rapidly. Money and returns are still king and likely to remain so for the foreseeable future. But changes in social perceptions are moving the dial a little bit, although we have much further to travel in that direction. And I think what we need is, and I think Kubra will pick up on this later as well, we need more push from regulators, we need more push from governments in general, from securities commissions and from exchanges, stock exchanges, to help us to develop in the way that we need if we're to have a truly sustainable future that is infused with a better sense of purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. As a team, you have previously explored the need for corporate purpose and asked the question why companies do what they do. Kubra, if we can get your views, please. Is purpose an advantage or is it a liability? And what leadership steps should the firms take to ensure that their purpose statements does justice to pursue their long-term goals?
Thank you, Asli. So, yes, first of all, what I want to start saying is that there are plenty of purposes, of course, that asset managers could be picking from to articulate. However, in our articles, as Paul has also explained quite a bit, we push for the concept of ESG as the best option. And aligning your strategy with sustainability may offer a lot of benefits for an asset manager. For example, this will resonate with your clients and it will help you build a trust bond with your clients. However, at the same time, your question is also very valid, Asli, because sometimes having a very strong purpose and making sure that you always want to really remain persistent about your purpose, as much as it brings you a lot of advantages, sometimes it could also make the life of an asset manager a bit difficult. Why? Because when you are sticking to your purpose, oftentimes it may create some conflict with some of your stakeholders who may not be having the same values as you do. So let me give some specific examples, okay? One is that asset managers in general have to abide by mandates. Those mandates are set by asset owners. So, and those mandates oftentimes are more focused on financial return. as an asset manager who values sustainability and when you are trying to make your investment decisions mainly also based on sustainability, for example, you may have to simply decline a new business that is coming if that mandate does not fit your purpose. Okay, so that would be one example where it would be difficult for you to pursue your purpose. Secondly, regulation. Sometimes regulatory agencies also do not make your life very easy. For example, it usually depends, of course, where you are sitting. If you are sitting in Europe, it may be very different compared to if you are sitting in the United States. For example, this is just an example, but it's written in law in the United States that asset managers' fiduciary duty has to primarily focus again on financial return. At the same time, in the United States, there is no written law that says that your investment decisions also have to integrate sustainability. Again, regulation may make your life difficult in terms of making your investment decisions and pursuing your purpose and your long-term goals. So this is, of course, not easy. It's very difficult, actually, and therefore you may be needing very, very strong leadership skills. We recommend transparency, consistency, and to be very, very clear on your communication as important leadership skills. Why? Because maybe these days, if you are an asset manager and you are dealing with all these challenges, it's no longer your responsibility to simply manage assets. At the same time, you also have to demonstrate those leadership skills because you have to receive the buy-in and the acceptance from other parties. Okay, so for example, you may have to do some bridge building between various stakeholders who may have different values and bringing everyone to the same page. The way that I like thinking about this is on an individual level, like when we, for example, face dilemmas in our daily lives, in a personal situation. For example, I feel very comfortable sometimes formulating a purpose in my own mind, and I'm also quite successful in succeeding in this purpose in my own actions. However, the moment that you are also integrating other people, like let's say other parties are joined in the activities, then it's more difficult. Why? Because you also have to gain their acceptance, their endorsement. And so same thing applies for asset managers as well. That is where they have to really push for ESG integration. Finally, just one more thing I would like to say is that's why in our very last article, we have given the title to our article, From Why to Why Not. With that, we mean is that maybe we need to recommend asset managers to have two sets of questions. So the first question, as Paul has explained very well in the last, when he was speaking, what is your purpose? And define your purpose, articulate your purpose very well. And that's really great. But now, as new challenges are coming, then maybe you may also have to ask yourself even a tougher question of why not? Which means that you have to push yourself when the challenges are coming, instead of giving up, why should I not be integrating ESG? Or pushing your stakeholders to ask the same question, and therefore forcing yourself to remain in force. And this is how you can actually give justice to your purpose statement.
Thank you, Kubra. And on that article which you mentioned, From Why to Why Not, where you look into what corporations should do to manage ESG, I would actually like to get Anand's opinion. Can you please lead us through your findings and help us understand the dynamics behind the continuing stock market outperformance of a narrow set of corporates?
Yeah, no, thanks. This has been a very interesting year. I'm sure everybody sitting in this room appreciates that. We are all sitting in front of a screen and talking to each other instead of being in a typical conference room. And it's a lot to do with the pandemic. This COVID pandemic has put, if you think about it, ESG at the heart of society, as it's increasingly becoming apparent that this dysfunctional relationship between humans and the environment is one of the key contributing factors for this appearance of this pandemic. Now, I think Kubra mentioned it earlier. If you look at the US, where climate change is a very contested concept, till recently, ESG investment factors had to be justified by explaining why. While when you look at Europe, investment managers typically had to explain why not. Now, this transatlantic divide, where one side of the ocean was very skeptical, asking why, while the other was more driven, asking why not, changed with this current pandemic. And when we look at data on what kind of funds are popular with investors, historically, most of the interest in ESG-aware funds used to come from Europe, with very limited interest from the United States. That changed this year. If you look at the cumulative amount of capital which has flowed into ESG-aware funds in the US this year, post-COVID-19, it has exceeded the flow that we saw from Europe for the last 2 years. Clearly, what we are seeing as a trend is the skeptical why camp, which was in the US, is slowly moving towards the uniform why not camp as far as ESG and sustainability is concerned. Now, coming to your question in terms of market performance, when you look at what markets have done this year, what is stark is the continuing outperformance of a very narrow set of companies. I think it's all over the media now, so everybody is aware of the fact that technology companies have been big beneficiaries of the current COVID-19 environment, and they do dominate the performance rolls of honor. But there is another set of companies which do not necessarily fit into this tech narrative, but are continuing to outperform. When we look for a common thread among all these companies, what is a fact is that they all derive a significant portion of their value from what we call as intangible assets. Paul touched upon this a bit earlier. Intangibles, the most common type of such assets are stuff like the strength of your brand or the value of your intellectual property, which helps you build moats, which money cannot buy easily and takes time to build and acts as an entry barrier. A key contributor to build up of intellectual assets is human capital. Now, this is catching the attention of market players. Why? Because traditional valuation metrics do not properly reflect or capture the value of these intangible assets. So accounting-based conventions are not able to capture them properly. Now, when we look at the ESG world, corporates are increasingly facing the same challenge that is apparent in the struggle to value intangible assets. Companies recognize that the long-term commitment to ESG principles is necessary for long-term value creation, and that many investors care passionately about ESG. But how does a company capture the value of this commitment to ESG in its balance sheet? Because if it's not reflected in the numbers, investors struggle to value it. Now, let's go back to the example of technology companies, which have been stellar performance this year. Now, traditional valuation metrics show that a lot of these companies are overvalued, but these are based on accounting-based balance sheets that poorly reflect the intangibles that are there. The balance sheets typically reflects physical assets, which these guys don't necessarily depend on. Markets are often more insightful, and they are able to better integrate the potential for the future intangibles in the valuation and reward these companies. If you look at what does the market depend on, the market typically depends on alternate metrics, what is popularly called as non-GAAP metrics, which are reported by these companies, and it helps market value these companies away from the accounting metrics. Now, this is a good example for corporates to keep in mind when they are dealing with reporting issues on ESG. Instead of thinking about why should I report stuff which is not required by regulations, why not think why not? Investors care about what you are doing to address ESG issues. And if they are convinced about the value proposition of the actions, they will suitably reward you with higher market valuations. Whether accounting conventions warrant these reporting or not, corporates should increasingly think that if it is adding value, they should look about reporting that. And I think when you look at this year's market performance, that's one of the key messages that people need to take, that intangibles do matter and markets are valuing them. And increasingly going forward, we would think that this is going to be more and more focused. Lots of accounting groups that I'm in increasingly are focused on this and saying, hey, there is something that the market is looking at and valuing. It's not reflected in companies' balance sheets, profit and loss accounts. how do we ensure that this gets reflected? Otherwise, increasingly, a lot of investors will say that, hey, the accounting statement is not meaningful for me. I mean, just to give one number before I kind of conclude, globally, if you look at the market value of all stock markets, it's about 104 or 105 trillion. Now, a study found out that 35% of this value is accounted for by intangibles. Now, that's a pretty significant number. If such a big number is not being captured by, and market is looking at other valuation metrics, over time, accounting bodies are going to look and say, hey, how do I reflect this in balance sheets? And my advice to corporates is that you don't have to wait for things to change. If you think there is value, start reporting and discussing about it in your reports.
Yeah. Wow, 35%. That's a very significant number. Can we continue with you, please, on the next question? Asset managers, as we've already discussed, they are among the leading stakeholders that are driving companies to address sustainability. What is your incentive to take on this role? How do you use the data behind ESG? And what are the main tools and concerns for you as asset managers? Because we as companies would like to deliver on this front as well. So what makes a good company from your perspective?
Oh, that's a lot of questions. Okay, let me try to tackle it one by one. I hope I don't take up too much time trying to do that. If you look at asset managers, what do asset managers do? Asset managers invest their clients' life savings, and they have a fiduciary duty to manage risk and generate returns for the clients. Traditionally, the asset managers used to focus on sustainability issues, mainly from a risk management perspective. Dr. Agudan talked about it in the initial part. But as ESG issues are becoming more mainstream, the long-term cost of not taking action on sustainability issues is rising. And asset managers increasingly realize that. So first, to have confidence that the companies that you're investing in, they will sustain their business models in the long run and continue generating profits, managers need confidence that the business is not under-investing in ESG. Because today, if you're not reporting and you're not investing, it could catch up with you in the future. Second thing is that if you look at asset owners, your pension funds, the people who kind of give out big pools of money, they are increasingly demanding that businesses become agents of change. And as fiduciaries, it becomes duty bound for the asset manager to ensure that action is taken by the invested companies and there is a desired impact which the asset owner wants. Third, if I look at it from an incentive perspective, the incentive to take an active role is to ensure that a common template emerges. Many investment mandates today are global. While if you look at ESG issues, a lot of action is driven locally. Increasingly, we are finding that regulatory bodies in different places are coming up with different rules and guidelines for tackling ESG issues. Now, this is creating a complex mishmash of reporting requirements, which sometimes can be at cross purpose with the ultimate goal, which is to make a lasting impact on society. And let me tackle the issue about what you asked in terms of how is data behind ESG used. What we are finding is that increasingly companies are reporting large amounts of information to comply with demands from various stakeholders. Like I said, increasingly in every part of the world, every local body is asking for information. Now, the amount of time and manpower committed to data collation in many organizations seems to eclipse the actual effort which is put into making a difference to issues which matter. And as an asset manager, what am I most interested in? I'm most interested in the impact. Not in the dreams of data which sometimes gets reported. What I want to know is that, is the impact lasting? Is it making a difference? Is it material to the business of the company? And most importantly, obviously the cost of those initiatives. So what you're looking after for is the cost, is it making an impact? As an asset manager, you want to be sure that the business is not underspending as costs catch up in the future. At the same time, you want to be sure that the spending is not being wasted. Every business has different pressure points. What I would ideally want an organization to do is to identify the relevant issues for their stakeholders, measure these issues, and report the impact of their actions in a very consistent fashion. That's really what an asset manager is looking for. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the question that you asked us, what is the biggest concern for an asset manager when you look at ESG data? It's really greenwashing. When we look at ESG data, it's not really about the amount of carbon that you have saved or the effort that you're putting behind recycling. These are all good and important, and it's all part of being a responsible corporate citizen. But what an asset manager is after is to ensure that the economic activities which are really being financed by the investor are consistent with the future environmental state of society, what the society wants to achieve, that there's an impact. The materiality of ESG data being reported is important to ensure that the business is sustainable. More than the absolute, many times it's the incremental change which the asset manager is after. He's trying to measure the data and what's the incremental change. And lastly, I think one of the questions you asked is, what makes a good company? If you ask me for a simple one word, it would be trust. A good company is one which carries along multiple stakeholders while delivering on its business objectives, thereby generating trust. Businesses do not operate in isolation. I think Paul talked about this earlier. There is this myth that investors and asset managers only care about shareholder primacy. No, I think asset managers do recognize that companies do not work in isolation. They exist in a society with multiple stakeholders, and the objective of profit generation cannot be the sole precedence because it will come to bite you back. A company which is widely respected and trusted has that intangible which I talked about earlier, something which is not getting captured in accounting metrics, but it is something that's increasingly valued by the marketplace. So for me, a good investment in my mind is a company which is delivering not only its business promises, generating profits, but at the same time is widely respected and trusted in society. I mean, that gives me a lot more confidence. I don't know whether I answered that question of yours.
For every company there. Thank you very much. Paul, let's now turn to you for your second round of the questions. There are several reporting standards. The key concepts in making progress to improve sustainability, though, are common. And I would call them as transparency and consistency. So can you please elaborate on this and share your views on materiality with us on this context?
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. I'll try and do so quickly because I want to very much listen to Dr. Argadan talk about his balanced scorecard, which I think is very important. But as you say, it's a real alphabet soup out there. You've got SASB, you've got TCFD, the Task Force for Climate Change, you've got the IRC, you've got GRI, you've got UNPRI, you've got the EU taxonomy, you've got the MSCI framework, China Green Finance Initiative, you've got private initiatives like focusing long-term capital. You've got a whole range of things out there, each one of which is actually very transparent. When you take it as an individual segment, it's very transparent, and there are multiple overlaps between all of them. But if you were coming to this conversation for the first time, you would be incredibly confused by the lack of clarity within the overall conversation, just because there are so many different standards and frameworks that you could go to. So I think that's a real problem, and it's really because there hasn't been, in my view, any regulatory oversight with or enforcement within all of this. It's really been voluntary. Companies have done this because they have felt pressures of one sort or another to disclose, and so a lot of these initiatives have grown up from the ground up rather than from the top down. Mm-hmm. And obviously this is an area where leadership, global leadership, is going to be absolutely key if we're going to bring some common sense to this conversation. But alas, in a world that is continuing to pull itself apart rather than to stick itself together, I think looking for any form of global leadership in this area is unlikely to bear fruit. Remember that in the accounting world, it's been 100 years since we had different US accounting conventions to UK accounting conventions and internationally accepted accounting conventions. So why on earth we should expect us to develop a global standard for sustainability is, I think, a little bit of a myth. So I think what we have to expect here is much more push from the bottom up, much more leadership from companies themselves to bring some common sense to this area. and much less ducking of responsibility, if you like. I think because there's confusion in this area, too many analysts, too many IR professionals perhaps, have sort of hidden behind that confusion and refused to engage as a generally accepted standard out there for reporting. We're not going to do anything, or we're not going to do very much. And I think that's a cop-out. People more and more expect a company to be doing something. Stock market analysts expect you to be doing something, and you have to begin to work your way forward. And I think that sort of segues into the materiality part of your question, because again, I think waiting for the accountancy profession to define materiality around sustainability, we'll all be much older and grayer than I am before that happens. The accounting profession have deliberately ducked this responsibility and have no intention of getting involved in it. So I think materiality as a concept, we all have to look at that from a corporate perspective and analyze idiosyncratically, if you like, our own individual business. Whether you're in, say, leisure and travel, or whether you're in natural resources, you've got to try and analyze the factors, the sustainability factors that really affect your business. And that could be natural resource depletion. It could be rising sea levels. If you own a bit of beach somewhere, that may be better to own a hill, because that could be beachside property in 50 years' time. Who knows? Those are the things that you've got to look at on an idiosyncratic basis, and you've got to do better to analyze that and explain the impact of sustainability on your business in the short, medium, and long term. And above all else, explain what you're doing to manage that impact, and to try within your corporate reporting to be consistent and clear to your internal and your external stakeholders. And so therefore, materiality really is, at this stage anyway, I think an idiosyncratic corporate judgment that's based upon how you see these things within your business. And if we are to build acceptable standards, I think they will come over time. But as corporations, we must stop hiding behind that lack of clarity and get on with the job, basically.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move to Dr. Argudan once again. And as it's of interest to you, it will be of interest to our audience as well. Argudan Governance Academy has developed a sustainability governance scorecard for the global sustainability leaders. And I would like to know the findings vis-a-vis what the pandemic has highlighted. So the importance of social issues, the growing risks vis-a-vis unemployment, poverty, inequality. Dr. Argudan, please share your views.
Thank you, Aslanım. We are very excited about this project, and the new version will be coming up next month. So I think it will be useful for many others as well. In this project, basically, what we are doing is reviewing global sustainability leaders, how they are reporting what they are doing with regards to sustainability. Who are these sustainability leaders? They are part of the major stock exchanges in 7 different major countries, all of which are part of the Sustainable Stock Exchanges initiative. And they are in 10 companies, are in 10 industries. Okay. And we are reviewing how they are providing governance to their sustainability issues. Because sustainability of the efforts for sustainability requires good governance of it. So we are looking at the information from a governance perspective. And some of the lessons that we can take are very interesting, because there are some very good examples, and we are publishing those good examples. Actually, I mean, they are part of the sustainability reports or the annual reports of these companies. But by looking at through the governance lens, we can identify good examples, and we are sharing those examples too. First of all, companies who are more successful tend to take this as a board priority, and it becomes a part of the board agenda. And the board also publishes their skills matrix, which involves sustainability as a major skill to be sought at the board. Second, they look at it from the perspective of not only their own companies, what they can do and what they can control easily, but rather look at the whole value chain and how they can influence the value chain for a more sustainable world. Because when you're, any company who is selling something for $100, more than $70 is constructed elsewhere. And when you are buying something, you look at the quality and the price. But if you're not looking at the processes by which these are produced and how it has an influence on the environment, social, and so forth, it comes back to haunt the major brands and so forth. So you have to look at the whole value chain and even the whole life cycle of your products. So those companies who look at it from this perspective tend to do better. And also what we are looking at is, are they reporting only what they have done, or are they establishing targets which are transparent, and are they sharing their targets? Because sharing a target means a commitment from the CEO. Reporting what you have done and providing some linkages might be done even by the PR effort or whatever. But when you establish a goal and target, you put resources behind it, which is very important. Another area that we are checking is how they are dealing with their stakeholders. Are they defining the stakeholders? Are they identifying the material issues for their stakeholders? And how they are addressing these things. So in a nutshell, if you are serious about it, make it as a business priority and make sure that all the reviews and incentives are aligned with this business priority. For example, our sustainability KPIs, part of the executive compensation. If they are not, when push comes to shove, you tend to ignore those KPIs. So these are extremely important elements that we are identifying and looking at it from reports of these global leaders. And there are really very good examples of how they report it. And by sharing these good examples, we are hoping to speed up global peer learning process to improve the state of the world from the best examples and so forth. So another final point I'd like to make is that those companies who are adapting some voluntary goals, such as the Global Compact or integrated reporting, which are not mandatory, tend to do better in terms of providing governance to their sustainability issues, because the outlook that these concepts or these initiatives provide helps company top managers to have a better ability to embrace the broad range of issues that they may be dealing with, and also identify their priorities better, because they cannot handle everything. They have to identify the material issues and so forth. So even being a member of the volunteer initiatives is a good indication of all the areas, and particularly the good governance area, where more collective action is required to make sure that we have a better world in the future.
I think
Thank you. Dr. Argüden, I was just suggesting, and sorry about this technical issue to the audience. We're doing our best here to resolve it, but I was just suggesting that once your sustainability governance scorecard is out, please share it with us so that we can distribute it also to our audience on our website and through our monthly.
We would be delighted to share our findings, because that's we do it as a public good, and we'd like to have the good examples known as widely as possible so that they will be adopted.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
So just our last 2 minutes.
Fascinating work.
Could you please just
I can't wait to see the fruits of your labour.
Because we need.
I don't know if we're going to get
together,
Ashley back.
As multiple stakeholders.
I think she's talking, but I can't hear her. I don't know if everyone else can.
But all together.
I can.
What role should policymakers play in making it in a timely manner to UN's 2030 agenda?
Yes. Thank you, Asu. So in our articles, actually, we often talk about how we want to create change as a society. If you want to create change as a society, you need to do it on every level. So we as individuals, and private organizations, non-profit organizations, they all are actually capable to push for change, for better ESG integration into the business world. Just some examples, you have activist Greta, or you have Elon Musk with his Tesla. These are great examples of individuals actually doing this change. And then as a corporation, private corporation, have, for example, Unilever is a great example that pushes for sustainable development. So all that said, at the end of the day, it is very, very important what governments do also, and how they set the rules for all of us. Because without government interference, it's very difficult for us to do that change. So even though I can think of many ways of policymakers how they could create change, I will focus on 3 of them. So one is that the main goal for a regulatory agency should be to prevent greenwashing. As Anand and Paul have said several times, and Dr. Argudan, it should really not be a box-ticking exercise, and I believe that regulatory agencies or policymakers could have influence there. Secondly, regulatory agencies should develop full range of tools for investors so that they can actually influence outcomes and allocate capital. Anand has also mentioned that before. Oftentimes, whenever there are imbalances, actually that's a perfect place for policymakers to make sure that the funds could really flow where they are really needed. For example, this is a Turkish conference, so I will give an example from Turkey. If we believe that education is one place where Turkey really needs funds to flow, then this is what policymakers should be focusing on. And my third point, where regulatory agencies should push for change, is to mitigate the differences and actually maybe from now on act a bit more on a global platform and in coordination with each other. Again, as Anna mentioned before, in the US, for example, climate change is a contested concept, but in Europe, it's becoming like a legal obligation to integrate climate change in investments. So policy making should really not be done country by country basis. There should be a global consensus, and policymakers should also strive for that, even more than it is the case today. Indeed, one final point that I want to make, regulatory agencies are very powerful, or global exchanges, or policymakers, whoever is in that position to make that, setting the rules, can be very powerful. And sometimes they don't even need to be that forceful. They could, for example, just signal that there will be a regulation coming. Just with a signal, they can have some impact. Take energy companies today, globally. Even where in countries where there is no specific regulation, many energy companies are voluntarily today switching from fossil fuels into renewable energy. Why? Because they know they have taken that signal from the regulatory agencies and from governments, etc., that this will come if they don't do it. So they don't want to be punished. They want to do it. They are smart and they want to start doing it on their own. So definitely government involvement is needed, and it should act as a catalyst for that improvement and for the positive change.
Great. Wow, what a team. Thank you all for joining and supporting us today. And also thanks to Argudan Governance Academy for bringing this wonderful group of experts together. We'll have a very short break, and after that, we go on to the second panel. Thank you.